It all started with a feeling that I couldn't shake off, like I was missing something in my life. At first, it wasn't obvious. I didn't wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to do something that will destroy everything I have. No, it was more like a gradual build-up. My marriage was fine, I guess. We had our ups and downs like any couple. But somewhere between the daily routine, the kids, the bills, the never-ending cycle of work and home responsibilities, I started feeling invisible. I'm not saying I wanted attention for the sake of it, but there was a certain kind of longing inside me that I couldn't pinpoint. I had always been a good wife. I loved my husband, Jake. We met in college, and everything felt like a fairy tale back then. The first few years of our marriage were exciting, but over time, the spark began to fade, and I don't think either of us knew how to keep it alive. He was busy with work, and I was busy managing everything else, making sure the kids were okay, cleaning, cooking, doing everything that needed to be done. But despite all that, there was something missing. I met Mark about a year ago. He was a neighbor, someone I'd known casually for a while. We'd chat at the mailbox or at the kids' soccer games, but we were just acquaintances. He was different, though. Mark was easy to talk to. He wasn't like Jake. He seemed to understand me in ways I couldn't explain, and that made me feel seen. At first, it was harmless. We'd exchange a few words, and that was that. But then, one day, we ended up having a conversation that went deeper. We talked about our lives, our frustrations, and our unmet needs. It wasn't an intense conversation at first, but it felt intimate, like we were sharing something secret. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, that was the moment everything changed. We started running into each other more often. A little joke here, a smile there. Then came the texts. Nothing inappropriate, just light and fun, but still enough to make me feel excited. I hadn't felt excited in a long time. It was like a breath of fresh air in my stale life. One evening, after a long day of dealing with the kids and trying to manage dinner, I found myself texting Mark. Jake was at work, and the kids were with their grandmother. It was a rare moment of peace. Mark had texted me first, asking how my day had gone. I responded, and soon our conversation turned playful. I felt this strange pull toward him, like something I couldn't ignore. We started talking about our favorite movies, books, and music. Mark had this way of making everything sound so interesting, and I realized how much I had missed having someone to share those simple things with. It wasn't long before we started talking about our personal lives in more depth. He shared frustrations with his marriage, and I opened up about mine. Neither of us was happy in the ways we wanted to be, and in those moments, it felt like we understood each other better than anyone else in our lives. Eventually, one night, I invited him over for a glass of wine. It wasn't planned, but it just felt like the right thing to do. He came over, and we sat on the porch, talking for hours. The more we talked, the more I realized how much I had been missing this kind of connection. When he left that night, he kissed me on the cheek. It was brief, but it lingered. That's when I started to feel a shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Mark wasn't like anyone I'd known before. He was attentive, kind, and seemed genuinely interested in me, not just as a wife or a mother, but as a person. I wanted more of that attention. I wanted to feel special again, and the more we texted, the more I wanted to be around him. The line between friendship and something more started to blur, but I told myself I was just being foolish. Nothing would happen. I was married after all, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, we started spending more time together. Our conversations became more intimate, our touches more lingering. I'd lie to Jake about where I was, using excuses to leave the house and spend time with Mark. It was thrilling in a way I couldn't explain. I told myself it was harmless, just a little attention, nothing more. But deep down, I knew I was crossing a line. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I was already emotionally invested in Mark, and soon I would be more. That night, when Jake came home late from work, I was already texting Mark. My heart raced as I typed back to him, knowing full well that I was pushing boundaries I had never thought I would. What started as innocent flirting had already evolved into something much more. And what was more terrifying was that I didn't know if I wanted it to stop. I didn't think of it as betrayal at first. It wasn't like I was having an affair. It wasn't like anything physical had happened yet, but emotionally. Emotionally, I had already crossed the line, and deep down, I knew it. The guilt didn't hit me yet, not in a way that could stop me. It was still too new, too exciting. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was becoming someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was willing to risk everything for a few moments of excitement. And as I sat there in my living room, the kids asleep upstairs, I realized something was happening inside me that I didn't know how to stop. As the days passed, I could feel it. The slow burn of guilt mixing with desire. I never imagined I'd be in this situation, yet here I was, texting Mark more and more, sneaking around behind Jake's back. I thought I could keep things under control, that it was all just innocent fun. But my actions were starting to feel like something I couldn't undo, no matter how much I tried to convince myself it was harmless. The tension between Mark and me built up gradually. It was strange at first. This pull I felt when I was around him, this energy that I couldn't quite explain. The smallest touch of his hand, a glance that lingered too long. It all made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. He made me feel desirable again. He made me feel like I was more than just a wife, more than just a mother. For the first time in so long, I was seen. And in that moment of being seen, I forgot everything. I forgot the vows I made, the family I built, the life I had with Jake. I had told myself I was just bored, just needing some excitement in my life. But what I was really looking for was something deeper. Something I hadn't even realized I'd been craving until Mark came into the picture. It wasn't just the thrill of sneaking around. It was the connection I felt with him. Every time we were together, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't done in years. I shared parts of myself with Mark that I hadn't even shared with Jake. It was like Mark was the person who finally understood me, who made me feel alive again. But I was still trying to deny it. I told myself that nothing physical would happen, that it was just emotional, just a flirtation. I could handle it. I could walk away at any moment, right? Wrong. It was late one evening when everything changed. Jake was working late again, and I knew the kids were staying at their grandmother's. I had the house to myself, and that familiar feeling of excitement, of anticipation, bubbled up in my chest. Mark had texted me earlier, asking if I wanted to meet up. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name on my phone. It had become a routine, these little moments where we would connect, these stolen conversations, these fleeting moments where we could be more than just neighbors. This time, I couldn't say no. I invited him over. I told myself it was just for a quick drink, that it would be harmless. But even as I sent the text, I knew it wouldn't be. I knew what was coming. Mark arrived about half an hour later. The second he walked through the door, I could feel the tension in the air. He looked at me, and his gaze lingered a little longer than usual. We exchanged a few pleasantries, but it was clear neither of us was interested in small talk. We moved straight to the living room, and before long, I found myself sitting next to him on the couch, our shoulders brushing lightly, our conversation becoming more intimate. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My body felt like it was on fire, every inch of me aware of him sitting so close. The space between us seemed to disappear. We talked and laughed and shared stories, things we hadn't told anyone else. I felt like I was drowning in him. I could feel him leaning in closer, and I knew what was coming. I shouldn't be here. Mark said softly, his voice low, as his hand brushed against mine. But I can't stop thinking about you. I froze for a moment. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to say no. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself leaning in too, feeling his lips near my ear as he whispered my name. And just like that, I couldn't deny it anymore. The distance between us, both physical and emotional, was gone. Our lips met. It was like a dam had broken inside me, and all the emotions I'd been suppressing came rushing to the surface. The kiss was soft at first, gentle like a question. But when I kissed him back, the question turned into something deeper, more urgent. His hands found their way to my waist, pulling me closer to him, and I felt the flood of heat course through me. It was a dangerous thing, what we were doing. I knew that. But in that moment, I didn't care. I couldn't care. There was too much I wanted to feel, too much I was starved for, and it all seemed to fall away when Mark touched me. Things moved quickly after that. One moment we were sitting together, talking, and the next, he was pulling me into his arms, his lips pressing harder against mine, his hands exploring. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to pull away, to think of Jake, to think of my family, of everything I had. But the rest of me, I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to think. I didn't want to feel the guilt that was starting to gnaw at me. I just wanted to be with him, to lose myself in the feeling of being wanted, and that's exactly what happened. Mark and I didn't stop. The moment was too charged, too urgent, too much to ignore. What started as a kiss quickly escalated, and before I knew it, I was in his arms, my body reacting in ways I hadn't felt in years. I know I should have stopped, but I didn't. I couldn't. I lost myself in the moment. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this alive, this desired. It was as if I had forgotten who I was before this. I wasn't a wife, a mother, a woman who had to hold everything together. I was just me. And Mark saw me. He wanted me. It didn't stop there. We didn't just kiss. He undressed me slowly, carefully, like he was savoring each moment. It felt like I was unraveling with every touch, with every kiss. And then, I knew there was no going back. But just as quickly as the moment began, something pulled me back to reality. My phone buzzed. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the name on the screen, Jake. I didn't pick it up at first. I couldn't, not like this. But then the phone rang again, and again, and again. I froze. Jake had never called me this much before. There was something in the urgency of his calls that made my blood run cold. Something felt off. But as Mark's hands moved over my skin, as his lips found mine once more, I told myself I didn't have time to think. Not yet. Not yet. It was a bizarre, unsettling feeling. My heart was racing in my chest, and my thoughts were spinning in a dizzying whirlpool of guilt, desire, and fear. The phone kept ringing, louder and more persistent with each call, and for a moment, I thought I might just throw it across the room to silence the damn thing. But I couldn't. Something was pulling me back, some sense of responsibility, a flicker of the woman I used to be. The wife, the mother, the person who cared about the family she had built. Mark's hands were still on me, his lips pressing harder against mine, and for a split second, I thought I could ignore everything. Pretend like nothing mattered except what we were doing. I didn't want to answer the phone. I didn't want to face the reality of the choices I was making. But then, the call came through again. My gut twisted. It was Jake. His name flashed across the screen, his photo smiling back at me from the phone. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I pulled away from Mark, my breathing shallow and erratic. I have to answer this, I said, trying to steady my voice, though it felt like my world was unraveling. Mark's face darkened, and I saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. You sure? We were just... I know. I cut him off, my voice trembling slightly. I need to take this. Mark didn't say anything more. He leaned back on the couch, running his hand through his hair, his eyes still burning with desire. But there was something else there now. Something like disappointment. I couldn't blame him. After all, I had made a choice, and I just walked away from it for a damn phone call. I picked up the phone, my fingers shaking as I swiped to answer. Hey, babe. Jake's voice came through the receiver, rough with exhaustion. But there was something else. Something in the tone that sounded different than usual. Something off. Jake? I breathed, trying to sound normal even though everything in me felt wrong. Is everything okay? There was a pause on the other end. Then Jake sighed heavily. No, actually, it's not. I've been trying to get a hold of you for the last 20 minutes. You're not picking up, and I'm starting to get worried. I swallowed hard, trying to push the guilt down into the pit of my stomach. I didn't hear the phone. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to finish the sentence. How could I tell him the truth? How could I explain that while he was working late? While he was out there earning a living for our family, I was sitting in our living room, about to make a mistake that could ruin everything. I'm sorry, babe. I was just worried. You've been distant lately, and I don't know. I just needed to hear your voice. His words were soft, almost like he was pleading. I felt a pang of something, regret, maybe, cut through me. Jake hadn't been perfect, and neither had I. We'd both neglected each other in our own ways, but this wasn't the way to fix things. This wasn't how to feel seen or heard. I was lying to him. Lying about where I was, about what I was doing. And the worst part was, I didn't even know how to stop. I'm fine, really, I said, forcing a smile even though he couldn't see me. Just a long day, you know. I'm here now. We'll talk when you get home. Okay, okay, Jake replied, his voice softer now. But we need to talk, Jess. We need to figure this out, all this distance between us. I miss you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt sick to my stomach. I miss you too. But it wasn't him I had been craving. It was someone else. Someone who didn't know me like Jake did. Someone who saw me through a different lens. Someone who made me feel wanted, sexy, alive in a way that Jake just didn't anymore. I could feel Mark's eyes on me, burning with impatience. But I couldn't just hang up on Jake. Not yet. Yeah, I whispered, my voice breaking. We'll talk. I promise. But I've got to go now, okay? I'll see you when you get home. All right, Jake said, though I could still hear the uncertainty in his voice. I love you, Jess. I love you too, I said, my words hollow, because in that moment, I didn't know what love was anymore. I didn't know if I was lying to him, lying to myself, or just too far gone to find a way back. I hung up the phone, setting it on the coffee table with a shaky hand. Mark was still sitting there, his expression unreadable now. He didn't say anything, but I could feel the tension in the air between us. It was like the spell had been broken. I sat down next to him, my heart pounding as I tried to regain some sense of control over myself. But there was no control anymore. The damage had already been done. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to go back to the life I had with Jake. I didn't know how to undo what had already happened. I couldn't take back the kiss, the touch, the way my body had responded to Mark in a way I hadn't felt in years. I don't know what to do anymore. I whispered, looking at Mark, my voice barely audible. This is wrong. But it feels so good. I can't stop myself. Mark didn't reply at first. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite understand. I know, he said finally, his voice low. I can't stop either. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't the only one losing control. Everything was unraveling, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop it. The hours that followed felt like an eternity. It was like time had split in two, the reality of the life I had built with Jake, the life that had once felt secure, and the chaotic, intoxicating pull I felt toward Mark. I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the wreckage of everything I had ever known, and yet I couldn't find the strength to turn around. I kept replaying that phone call with Jake in my head, hearing his voice over and over, his words echoing in my ears. I miss you. The guilt of it all crashed over me in waves, but underneath it was a deeper, darker feeling, something I couldn't shake. I didn't know if it was regret or relief or something else entirely. It didn't matter. It was there, and it was real. But the more I tried to focus on Jake, the more my mind wandered back to Mark. The pull toward him was magnetic. It was almost as if my body was no longer under my control. I hadn't planned for things to go this far, but once that line had been crossed, there was no going back. And Mark didn't seem to care that I was married. He didn't seem to care about the damage we were causing. All he cared about was the now, the moment, and what we were doing in it. And I couldn't deny that I was caught up in it. I had wanted this. I had craved it. In a way, I had chosen this. Mark shifted next to me on the couch, his eyes still locked on mine. He didn't say anything, just reached out to gently touch my arm. It was a simple gesture, but it sent a shock of electricity through me. I felt my pulse quicken. Do you regret it? Mark's voice was low, almost a whisper, and for the first time that evening, I saw a vulnerability in his eyes. There was something searching there, like he was looking for an answer, but he didn't know if he wanted the truth. I swallowed, the words choking in my throat. I don't know. I honestly didn't. In that moment, I couldn't even figure out what I was feeling, let alone what I wanted. Regret, maybe. Desire, definitely. Guilt, of course. But beyond all that, I was just lost. I think I'm falling for you, he added quietly, his hand brushing against mine. The words were innocent, but they hit me like a punch in the gut. I pulled my hand back slightly, my chest tightening with panic. Mark, you can't say that. I'm married. I have a family. My voice cracked as I said it, like I was trying to hold on to something, anything, that still made sense. I know you are, He replied, his voice soft but determined. But that doesn't change what's happening between us. It's real, Jess. What we have is real. I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words settle deep inside me. This wasn't just a fleeting thing. This wasn't a mistake that could be swept under the rug. It wasn't just physical. It had become emotional. It had become complicated. I stood up abruptly, needing space, needing to get away from the intensity of the moment. I paced the room, my thoughts a whirlwind. How did I let this happen? Mark stood too, his gaze following me. Jess, talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling. I can't keep pretending like this isn't something real. I stopped in my tracks, the words hitting me like a sudden wave, pulling me under. Something in his voice made my heart ache, but the part of me that was still tethered to my life with Jake screamed in protest. I couldn't admit this to him, to myself, that I was torn between two men, between two lives. I don't know what I feel anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what's real. Mark stepped closer to me, but I took a step back. I need to figure this out, I said, my voice shaky. I need to figure out what I'm doing. I don't want to hurt Jake. I don't want to hurt anyone. But I also don't want to lie to myself. I know, he said, his voice softening, but you have to face it. You can't keep running from what you want, Jess. What we have, it's real. His words hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. And as much as I hated to admit it, a part of me knew he was right. What we had, what had started as a simple, flirtatious exchange, had become something more, something far beyond what I was ready to confront. Just then, the door opened, and I heard the sound of the kids laughing in the hallway. I froze, my heart skipping a beat as the reality of my situation came crashing down on me. This wasn't just about Mark anymore. This was about the family I had, the life I was trying to hold together, and the damage I was causing by chasing after something that was slipping through my fingers. I quickly grabbed my phone from the table and saw a missed call from Jake. Then a text, "I'm almost home. I love you." It hit me like a wave of cold water. I loved him. I did. But I had just crossed a line I couldn't take back. The kids ran into the room, their innocent faces bright and full of energy. They didn't know what had been happening. They didn't know what was about to happen to their family. They didn't know that their mother was standing at a crossroads, torn between the life she'd built and the life she was about to destroy. "Mom, can we have some juice?" my daughter asked, pulling me back into the present moment, her wide eyes full of trust. I smiled, though it felt like a mask, a facade. "Sure, sweetheart, I'll get it for you." I turned to Mark, who had stepped back, giving me space. He was looking at me, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I could see he was waiting for me to make a decision, waiting for me to choose him. But how could I choose? I couldn't. Not yet. Not like this. As I left the room to get the juice, I felt a tight knot in my chest. My mind was in turmoil. My emotions a tangled mess of guilt and desire. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again.